Okay, it's the New Year's show, New Year's Eve show, last podcast that you and me will do until 2025. So how's that feel, Dakota? We made it another year.
Quite a crazy year, my friend. Peaks and valleys, I would say, for boxing in 2024. Seems like it's probably overall a net positive, but a wild year nonetheless.
Yeah, for sure. And it seems like the internet's trying its hardest to crap out on me. Yeah, so the big story, the lead, if you want to speak on it, is Fernando Martinez-Kazuto Ioka II. Pretty much the first fight for those that are super hardcore enthusiasts. It was a very exciting fight. It's also like a boxing nerds fight where you had to go on YouTube after the fact and watch it because it wasn't readily available on like streaming platforms in America. There's a Japanese streaming platform app that I think was going to offer a $5 or maybe did offer a $5 pay-per-view for this fight. For whatever reason, it didn't happen, etc. Fernando Martinez misses the media workout, misses the press conference, and then is out with influenza, I believe, or some form of an illness. It was announced like the day of the weigh-in. What are your thoughts of Fernando Martinez, the WBA junior bantamweight title holder, not doing the rematch with Kazuto Ioka, Japan, New Year's Eve?
I think the biggest thing, right, we were talking about this off air just now, I think it's what came first. Was issues making weight the inception of the issue, or did the illness cause issues making the weight? And sometimes it can be kind of a mixture of the two, but we generally don't think of champions, world champions, particularly a guy like Martinez who's already beaten Ioka. We don't think of him as a guy that would be lacking in discipline or having issues in that department. And so I think it's pretty obvious that there is something off with him here. It's just a matter of what came first. And I think whether or not we see him stay at this weight will kind of tell us what was the case going into this fight. Hopefully we can get a rematch sooner than later, provided that he recovers and everything. But yeah, it's definitely unfortunate. It was already a fight that was going under the radar and being underappreciated. Maybe this gives it a chance to get some of the attention it deserves.
What's your gut feeling of where both guys kind of go from here? Because Martinez was really on an upswing. Ioka to me is a Hall of Fame type fighter that no one really acknowledges. What are your thoughts in that regard?
I mean, my hope is that they get to run it back, but if they don't, that Martinez finds a weight class that is comfortable for him or is able to resume his reign as a champion in good health as much as possible. For Ioka, he's obviously a guy in his mid-30s. You go into the lower weights, depending on the situation, they start calling those fighters old. And so we want to see Ioka as many times as we possibly can. And hopefully we can see him, on a bigger platform before it's all said and done. He's a guy that, his fights with Josh Franco were great fights that I had to watch on YouTube after the fact. Same with his fights with Donnie Nietes. Again, one of the most underrated guys in all of boxing. And really, if he were to beat Martinez, all it would take is another notable opponent. If it's Bam, if it's Estrada, a great older guy fight. I think there's plenty of fights out there for Ioka. I think it's just a matter of the fans getting to see him.
Okay. It's frustrating, right? Because it's like this was supposed to be like the end of an era kind of fight. I think a lot of people expected Martinez to win the fight. And then it's like, okay, he goes into a new fight. If Ioka won the fight, then there's the Bam rematch. But I think what's frustrating, and we'll get into this now, is what is the state of the junior bantamweight division currently? What is out there for this division? Because it's like if I look at this, and I have to look at my notes for the show, basically Martinez gave up the IBF title that he had won in July, which was then fought. The vacant title was contested for like December 21st, I think. Rene Calixto Babiano versus Willie Baldo Garcia Perez fought to a draw. Then we got Bam Rodriguez, who most consider the best guy in the division. He's the WBC title holder. That makes sense. And then we got, oh my God, Fumilia Kafu won the WBO title over Kasi Tanaka. So there's a lot of moving parts in disarray, and there's not a lot of like organization to this division. And in all honesty, with that vacant title being a draw, with this happening, now we kind of have, Cafu might be doing a rematch. He might go somewhere else. Bam's just looking at big fights. From what I just told you, what do you think of this division?
Bro, I think the big thing too is it's kind of living in a different era, where that era of fighters is still around, but they're not as active, they're not fighting each other. But this was the Chocolatito, Juan Francisco Estrada, Carlos Cuadras, Sorong Vasai weight class. And those guys were like pillars of boxing. Chocolatito loses the third fight to Estrada, hasn't been active. Estrada has his fight with Bam, which is kind of a passing of the torch moment. Sorong Vasai back to regional fights in Thailand, and I'm not really sure what is up with Carlos Cuadras, who's had a ton of tough fights. It's just a division that outside of Bam is, I think, redefining itself, and we're figuring out who the new batch of guys that could make this weight class interesting. But this happens in weight classes when you have superstars retire, right? It's part of why welterweight's sort of in a weird position right now. We're in the post Floyd era. Now we're in the post Crawford Spence era. We're figuring out who those guys are. We're figuring out who the guys are at middleweight. And I think that 115 is another weight class, kind of in like an era transition.
That's a good point. Our guy TJ, salute, fellas. 2025 has some insane bouts already scheduled. I agree, they do. One other thing I wanted to bring up about this is kind of, when do you start to get nervous when a fighter might miss weight or a fight might be off fight week? What are some of the telltale signs? Because some smart people were kind of very early on this going like, this could go weird.
I mean, if I'm inside a camp, I think if you like hit a weight plateau or you start physically starting to what's the right word? You start wearing down as opposed to peaking. I think those are all telltale signs. But I feel like unless you're in the camp, it's tough to tell just from the outside looking in. I wouldn't have been able to call that. And there certainly hasn't been the kind of coverage of this fight that would have provided that insight, at least to us as American journalists.
Well, I mean, I kind of had some red flags. Like, I feel like I was one of the only people watching for the result of the weigh-in, 7:00 West Coast time on a Sunday night, which kind of tells you where my mind is. But when a guy, to me personally, when a guy misses a media workout and misses a press conference for pretty much the most relevant major marquee fight of his career, a rematch against a distinguished Hall of Famer, in my opinion, there's a level of concern that this fight might not happen, because those are two really big obligations to skip on. So for me, the way I would look at that is when just basically formalities, things that you expect to be normal, aren't happening. That's when I think fights can be in jeopardy from a outside looking in standpoint.
Absolutely, bro. And like you said, those things that are obligations to help, literally to help promote your fight, if you're not participating in those, I think that's always a sign of things to come potentially.
So let's go to the other thing about this is, like, I guess a side question is, how bad has this week been, or these last 2 weeks been for Japan? They lost in a way versus Sam Goodman.
Tough.
Then they lost this fight, which I think a lot of people are looking forward to. And to a lesser degree, they lost the WBA bantamweight champion fight, Yoshi Takai, taking on his first defense against Yatapong Tungdi, which I'm sure a lot of fans were waiting on, but that's still another title holder in Japan that won't fight. What are your thoughts on that? The fact that Japan lost 3 title fights of significant value in the last 2 weeks.
It's tough, bro. We're in this golden age of Japanese boxing, right? Japan's always had a ton of good fighters, but we're really in a moment, in an era right now where Japan as a country is like, I would say one of the more recognized countries in boxing right now, and has probably 2 or 3 guys in the pound for pound conversation. And I think to have 2 of those guys not be able to fight, obviously, is heartbreaking for those fans. But I think it's also, it's a reflection of the fact that we're in a really good era for Japanese boxing.
Hey, John, how you doing?
Hey, sorry I'm late.
It's all good. We're just talking about Japanese boxing right now. We started the show a little early. It's okay. Just for those that don't know, John Pullman, really good trainer. He trained a bunch of fighters. He can do his own introduction, but he's one of the most interesting people in boxing. And we were doing a boxing talk show, so I figured I'd ask him to come on. So thank you, John, for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me, and I appreciate all your kind words as well, man.
Well, as anyone knows, my Venmo is open, and that's where the kind words come from. We just kind of did like a 10-minute segment on Fernando Martinez versus Kazuto Ioka and how the fight fell apart. He's out of the fight, and kind of concerns. I guess what I'd like to throw to you is, as a coach, when do you start looking either as a coach or an outside observer that a guy might not be making it to fight night? Because I started having concerns about this fight real early on.
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I actually have a saying in my gym as a coach, from the coach's perspective, is we don't ever know that we have a fight until you get in the ring and you look across the ring and you see your opponent standing there. That's the only time you truly know that you have action. I mean, I've been involved in fights where the guys don't show up to the weigh-in, where they weigh in and then all of a sudden they get sick or they don't make weight and they don't show. I mean, so you really don't know you have a fight. I never I do my best just from a pure coach's perspective to never try to worry about the things I can't control. So all I can do is get my guy the best I can, and then the chips are going to fall where they fall, and hopefully, we get action, and hopefully it all works out for the best for us as well. But from a fan's perspective, I think noticing him not at the press conference is like a big red flag, right? Especially in Japan.
And the media workout.
Oh, the media workout, yeah.
He gave you a twofer. He missed the media workout and the press conference.
Yeah, that'll definitely raise some eyebrows for sure. Yeah, and it's just one of those unfortunate circumstances that happen with boxing, is because it's a one-on-one sport, so it's not like a team, right? If Patrick Mahomes is invaluable to the Chiefs, but if he's sick, they're still playing. There's still 50 other dudes that are gonna play. So boxing is it's just like that. One guy gets messed up and there goes your fight. So it's that eerie saying on every ticket you buy for a fight card subject to change. That's there. It's real, it happens, so just one of those things, man. You got to roll with the punches. And that's just, to piggyback off the same topic, when I'm talking to my fighters and they're looking at the rankings and oh, in next year I'm going to fight this guy. I said, you just beat the man that's in front of you that when you fight. Do not worry about, you have no idea how that's going to shake out. You have no idea how that part of the rankings are going to shake out. Don't even concern yourself with any of that. You fight the guy that's in front of you and you worry about him, and that's it. And you move on to the next one. Look at Jai Opetaia in his fight, right? He was just preparing for a guy that he was one of his sparring partners, I believe. And now he got everything flipped on its head, and he's fighting a real guy, I think. This Olympian dude that's with a lot of knockouts, and he's knocked out some guys that really aren't bums either. So, I mean, he's going to have to look out. That's a real fight, I think.
Okay, well, I wrote the show notes out, so let's not bury the lead there.
Oh, sorry.
It's all good. It's all good. That's why I wanted you. You jumped on here. But are we good about the Japan fights? Because they had the 3 fights fall apart. Tsutsumi, who fought, he looks like a guy. He beat Rene Alvarado. But everything else, I mean, this was really supposed to be Ioka Martinez. And the card was kind of underwhelming outside of that, unless anybody else has something else to say.
I think I'm good. I just want to, first of all, good to meet you, Coach.
My pleasure.
I guess one thing I would ask you is, when you hear that a guy got sick making weight, do you tend to lean towards the making weight made them sick, or the getting sick prevented them from making weight, if that makes any sense?
No, that makes a lot of sense. It could really go either way, to be honest. Typically my mind would go to that they're cutting too much weight. That's typically what I would think, but people do get sick. That happens, it does happen. A lot of fighters won't even admit they're sick, that's it happens very often, because when a fighter's cutting weight, actually their immune system is weakening. because they're depleting themselves of valuable nutrients that most people don't even have any idea what they're doing. You know, like the average person who goes to watch a fight, they have no idea that fighter just went through hell and back, 2 days ago to even get to this point, So most fighters, they're wired so differently than the average person, where they're so mentally tough that they don't even want to admit if they are sick, But yeah, my mind would generally go to they're cutting too much weight, but fighters do get sick. That happens too.
I had a pretty crazy. Oh, go ahead, Lukey.
Because not that I know anything, but I know a fighter who every camp when he cut weight, he got sick.
Yeah.
And the guys would be like, "Oh, he's cutting weight, he's getting sick again." And it was like that Saturday or Sunday when he started the hard cut, he got sick, and it was just kind of like, okay, he'll be good by Thursday. But it happened at like clockwork. He got sick every fight week.
Yeah, I've been around guys like that too. Yeah, he would always get that cold. You hear his voice starts changing. He's getting a little congestion. It's Yep, it happens. It happens.
Not that I know anything, but the thing I look for too is the voice. So when a guy's on the podium and their voice sounds like real messed up.
Yeah.
I always go, oh man, we gotta watch, especially if that's like someone that you care about, they're fighting. I'd go, darn it, we might not have a fight, or we might have a heavy guy.
I'll tell you what, the extreme weight cut changes your voice too, not even getting sick. Like they get so dehydrated and dry in their throat that their voice starts sounding different. That happens even not being sick too. Sometimes you hear like that day, like when they're really, really cutting weight, you talk to the guy, his voice sounds different. He's so dry.
And if they have the chapstick,
right,
and like there's like little things. I think I also noticed like when a guy's cutting weight, they look kind of sucked in, and the team's like trying to tell you, oh, it's been a good camp. Like they say all the things nobody ever says. Oh, it's been a good camp. Yeah. We really did things right by the book. He's never looked better. But like you can tell they're a little too close to him. The guy's way too eager to leave media events. I think that's another red flag too, right? Guys that are too eager to leave a media event, they're like, oh, I got to leave,
Yeah. I mean, it definitely can be. I'm laughing about these things, but they're really not funny, man. They're like, I'm laughing because this is hard. You laugh through the pain, because I've been in every one of these scenarios that you're bringing up, and they're never fun. They're never fun at all. But we just do the best we can. And at the end of the day, fighters are fighters, right? So essentially, it's like, that's the word. You're fighting for everything that you can get, That's what makes the sport so beloved, and also so like people are so like, kind of thrown back by, like, why are these people putting themselves through this? But if you've never done it, you really, it's hard to explain it.
I was going to share one story too. I put it in my book. Dakota probably knows this story. I already told you, but I'll say the fighter's name because it's more interesting if I do tell on the guy, right? It's not as fun if I don't say the name. So the first day of sparring, when Manuel Tino Avila was going to fight Jojo Diaz, which he did, he got cut by Albert Torres the first day. So he gets cut over his eye, gets it sewed up, but it was a big fight, so he wouldn't pull out of the fight. So the whole fight week, the whole goal is, for the love of God, don't let anyone see that you're going into the fight with this stitch, right? And I just remember that, like going through that experience, getting the phone call. The phone call was like a death, because how you get it, tell a boxer, tell a thing, hey man, bad news. He got cut tonight, sparring, 4th round. So I think he only did for that camp 4 or 6 rounds to fight Jojo Diaz. And then the rest was just running and stuff. And I remember that fight week was so, like, I learned so much for what to look for, because we were the red flag. The team was the red flag, because we were trying to conceal. So another thing that brought up for me was the idea we did was always wear a hat when you shadow box or go somewhere, so you could pull it real low. So like if I see guys always wearing hats, I'm looking at the eyes for abrasions.
I'm just covering my bald head. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that
just, if a guy's like shadow boxing with like a beanie or a bandana on, and it's like real low, you're like, all right, maybe they're hiding something,
Well, I mean, but see, that's my damage too, right? So you always put a little bit of yourself into the fight game, what you've lived through.
Yep.
But that's something that I lived through. So I'm always kind of over examining that because I remember that was a strategy the team came up with.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. It does make sense. But that's what experience does too, right? Experience is invaluable. So you can notice things like that. Someone who's never went through that, they might not even pick up on something like that.
Experience is the ultimate teacher in many ways. Often it's painful, but when you have the right experience and you're in the right place, it's a hell of a thing. Okay, Dakota, I want you to take the lead to the car. We're going to do our pound for pound list, but we're going to do it the opposite of most people. We're not going to just sit on here and talk for like hours and hours. We're just going to kind of run through it. And if people don't like the pound for pound list or have objections or whatever, I want conflict and all that stuff. Dakota, take the lead. You're the driver of this segment. Do it.
All right. Well, if I'm going off the rankings that you sent me last night, we're doing top 15, which I always prefer to do a top 15, by the way. I just think that giving that number of guys recognition, there's always a couple that are just outside that top 10 pound for pound that I think are worth acknowledging. But 15 to round out the year, we got 15 Virgil Ortiz, 14 Shock Foster, 13 is Zordo, 12 is Tiafimo, which to me is a little high. We can get into that.
Well, I thought these were mine. I was kind of hoping you'd come with your own, bro. But I was kind of hoping that you
sent it to me in the fucking email.
Oh, that was my list. That was my list. So
all right, then I'm going to be contradictory and read my list.
Then read your list. Read your top 15 to 10, and then we'll act like it's fifth grade or whatever. But
so for me, 15 is Daniel Dubois. I think he kind of earned his spot this year with the Hergovich wins and the Joshua wins. 14 is Arislandi Lara. 13, Shakur Stevenson. By the way, a lot of this would change in the last couple of weeks because of Tyson Fury's loss. So I've taken Tyson Fury at least a little bit lower on the list. 13 is Shakur. Then 11 is Fury. 12, Lomachenko. 10, Nakatani. 9, Tank Davis. 8, Benavidez. Then, so 7 is Bam. 6 is Canelo. 5 is Inoue. 4 is Crawford. 3 is Bivol. 2 is Beterbiev. And 1 is Usyk. Now, I know a lot of people are going to have their own lists. Everyone's got different criteria, whatever. But I'm seeing a lot of people taking Bivol off of their lists. And I felt like he beat Beterbiev. So for me, it's tough for me to go, okay, I thought he was the 4th or 5th, and now I'm taking him off the list. I think that's a guy who definitely deserves his spot.
I was going to ask that question if that's like a really tricky one, right? Because I'm not sure that I think Bivol won the fight, but he could have. And I know, yeah, and I know a lot of people do think he won that fight. So if you think he won the fight, then you got to rank him above Beterbiev, right, in the pound for pound, even though the judges said he didn't win, right?
At the end of the day, if it was my choice, I think I probably would. But my choice and the actual result has to trump, you know what I mean, my choice. I got to take the decision for what it is.
Even if it's your list?
Even if it's my list, bro, I take the official decision. You know, there's been tons of decisions that I don't like. But at the end of the day, the result is the result. I think the only exception at the time was the first time Conceição got the decision against Shock Foster. I did not move Shock in my rankings because I thought that decision was like borderline criminal. So I wasn't about to punish him for that.
That was one of the worst I've seen in recent years. I heard there was a really bad one in Thailand, but I missed it.
Oh, it just happened. It was Carlos Canizales. We tried to pretend like we really cared about it. But I mean, Canizales he would have had a hipster fight of the year conversation because he probably beat Kenshiro Taraji, won a fight that I didn't even care to watch. And then he fought a guy in Thailand and basically clearly won the fight. And then the judges just gave it to the Thai fighter, which I'm not saying that it was local favoritism, but when a local fighter seems to get outclassed and then they get a hometown decision, it starts to make you wonder how they saw the fight.
Yeah.
I think we're long beyond having to like justify that though, bro, because we just see it over and over and over again to where it's like, if it happens, I'm not spelling it out to you what happened, you know, or justifying, you know, why you're seeing what you're seeing. This is what happens in boxing all the time, bro. The hometown kid just gets, you know, the benefit of the doubt so many times.
What do you think What do you think that is? Because I wonder myself, like literally, do you think that that is the promoter literally telling the judges, like outright telling them, like, this is my guy, look after him? Or do you think that that is just kind of like a fall in line thing that the judges choose to do on their own? I can tell you what I think it is, but I'm just curious what you guys think when those decisions happen.
I think Lukey probably would know a little more than me, but
way to throw me under the bus there.
Hey, I'm just saying, bro, my personal take would be, you know, when you have a hometown fighter, especially when they're a bigger name, beyond just that fight, right? Like if they're fighting in their hometown often, that's generating a lot of revenue for a lot of different people. And so I just think that even if it's not explicitly stated, you know, the incentives are all to that fighter. And so it takes somebody really like stepping outside of that, I think, to prevent it.
Yeah, I think that that's like right there. I think that's right there.
Let me add mine. So I'm raising my hand, Buck. I think the issue is, and I think this the big issue is, it's a hard thing to quantify, but I think there are judges who score toward close rounds towards the promoter, knowing that they're going to get more opportunities to judge marquee fights, big fights. And I don't even think that it's necessarily bias per se. I think that it's like if you have a 60-40 round, they're going to go to the fighter that's more viewed as the A side, just in their head psychologically. Either there's multiple factors. One, I can get more opportunities, but I think the other thing too is they've been sold a bill of goods that this guy's a monster, he's this and that. So they might be seeing things. This guy comes forward and he's missing everything, but they're like, wow, look at how fast he is, because they've probably got all these packages about him. He's on posters. So I don't think there's one specific answer, but I think the answer is one fighter is typically billed as better than the other fighter, and that plays a factor in human error, right? Because people look at him and go, okay, that's the superstar fighter. And I think that it's hard for some people to objectively look at a fight and take away all the hoopla.
Yeah, I think both you guys gave like perfect example of reasons why that happens. You know, it's never one way, I'm sure, and there's a lot of nuances that goes to any like human making a decision, right? So I think those are good. Both you guys brought up great points, and kind of like I'm thinking around the same thing too.
Well, I mean, to me, boxing, like the bad side of boxing, comes down to two things, right? And I think Teddy Atlas first said this. It's either incompetence or corruption. And I don't know which one it is, because there's a lot of incompetence. And I'm not sure if there's corruption, but sometimes it feels like there could be corruption in boxing, but there's certainly incompetence. And it's wherever your mind goes. And my mind tends to go that things are not always run efficiently in boxing. You try to do trainings, you try to do that, but there's a level of like a buddy system in boxing, right? Like if you know the right people, you don't have to have the most talented fighter. You can get them signed, you know, and you can get a favorable path to a title. And you could be trained like John Pullman and Dakota could have fighters that are Olympians, but you don't know the right person, and you could have a much harder path, and people could go, I don't know if that guy can fight. But then they got a guy who's a lot of smoke and mirrors, and people are like, oh man, you got to see this guy. He's got a great IG video. He's got a TikTok video. Have you seen the TikTok video? And that's the issue, I think, that goes into the bureaucracy of boxing, is that we don't ever think about that, but that happens at all levels of boxing.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Well, that was terrible. I got everybody just like not talking.
No, I was just thinking about it because my mind goes there with a lot of guys that even are very well known now, you know, that I saw they took a path like that. But that doesn't mean, a lot of times they take an easy path, but that doesn't mean that they can't fight either, right? Like that might, if they get the opportunity to fight somebody really good, or when they do fight some really good, people think, oh, this guy has this pumped up record, which he might, but he still really is really good. You know, and then that path that they take, that easier path that they took, built up his confidence, gave him more time to train in the gym. He developed, and then a lot of this is mental too, right? Like you got all these big guerrilla promoters jumping on your back, and like screaming your name, you start believing that too. Like, and that does something for you as well, you know, as opposed to being the guy that's always left out. And you might be really good, but you're always left out. They don't see it in you. It takes like a really strong mentality to stick with it, even though you keep getting thrown in the gutter. Look at a guy like Charles Conwell. Well, we talked about him before, but he's given no easy path, and nobody's ever taught, and he's been patiently waiting his turn. I mean, even in his career, the things that's happened in his career, you know, he's been through a lot of ups and downs. Now, you don't even got to get specific about it, but we all know he's been through a lot of ups and downs. And I'm looking at him, and I think he might be the best 154 pounder.
He's
guy.
Definitely
the most underappreciated.
Yeah,
he's definitely the most underappreciated.
Him and Jesus Ramos.
Yeah, but I would like Charles Conwell. I like this. I might take him against anybody in the 154 right now, honestly.
Well, the thing about Conwell is nobody's bringing him up. They're not like, hey man, I want to fight Conwell. Like that kind of tells you he's good.
And media doesn't really mention him either. He doesn't like make TikTok videos to like what you were saying. He's not like this big boisterous talking guy. He's not flashy. He's puts on his work hat. He fights straight down the middle with solid technique. He was taught properly. He's super strong, super fast, super smart, and fights with excellent technique. It's like there's nothing kind of like super outside the box about him. So he's not looking to pound on his chest and get all his attention. He just beats everybody he fights. It's bad. You know what I mean? Like,
are you guys ready for me to get in trouble?
Let's go.
Okay. I think Conwell's the modern Ezzard Charles.
But why would that make you get in trouble?
Because there's going to be a dork that's going to be like, dude, there's no way that, because I think Usyk's a top 5 heavyweight of all time, and people lose their mind.
But I mean, why? Okay, the problem is this. The problem is once guys retire or pass away, or they go into this category of like untouchable almost. Like you can't. Usyk will be way more appreciated. Did he win 2 gold medals? I believe, right?
Yeah, I think he won 1. Did he win 2?
Okay,
Dakota,
don't know. He definitely won 1.
I thought maybe he won 2, but he might have gone pro before Lomachenko as well, so I'm not sure.
But for sure, 1 gold medal, undisputed cruiserweight world champion. Everybody said he was too small to fight heavyweight. He wasn't even like hurting the top guys in cruiserweights. Turns heavyweight, has a tough fight with Derek Chisora, right?
And Chaz Witherspoon.
Right. I mean, yeah, he knocked Chaz Witherspoon out, though, even though it was a little tough.
But I mean, it wasn't a great performance, to be fair.
Because he's too small. But all that guy does is acclimate and adjust. That's all he does. Like, I mean, I was sure Tyson Fury was going to beat him the first time. Like, if you would have asked me, I was sure he was going to beat him. And then halfway through the fight, I was like looking at Miriam like, see, I told you. and all that guy does is acclimate and adjust. So how could somebody get mad at you for saying that? If they really know what they're looking at. Have you gone
on the internet?
No, I don't care. I really don't care about that. I'm just think logically, you know, like if you know what you're looking at, the guy doesn't. What major flaws does he have?
Well, it's like, to me, like, and I want to get Dakota in here because he's my sidekick, and I don't want him just sitting like he's at a bus stop, like just listening to 2 guys talk boxing. That's lame. But like, to me,
don't do that, because if you get me and this guy on the phone, my girl's like tugging at me, like, get it. Like, all right, that's enough. Let's sit here and talk.
We get to talking boxing, and it's a problem. My girlfriend does the same, but it's like with Usyk, okay, you got to put Joe Louis ahead of him. You got to put Ali ahead of him. But then after that, it's like maybe Lennox Lewis.
I'm not saying that you do or you don't have to put those guys ahead of him, but why do you have to put them ahead of him? Dakota,
I think more for like historical significance. Lewis.
I'm talking about boxing wise, but I'm talking about
boxing wise, I think he might be the most fundamentally sound fighter ever at heavyweight, because he had the knowledge to look at those fighters and improve upon it. Like, he could arguably be the best heavyweight. I just think for historical significance, I put Ali and Lewis ahead of them because of what they did for the sport in different periods of time.
What do you think, Dakota?
I'll be honest. I think a lot of it comes to it's like people that are stuck in a different era. So there was a time, even like 20, 25 years ago, where American boxing was sort of like the centerpiece, the focal point of boxing. And then there was other scenes, right? There's the Mexican scene, there's the UK scene, but America was the center. Now I look at the top 10 at heavyweight. We don't really got a guy right now, bro. And we definitely don't have a guy in the top 5. And so I think American fans are stuck in that time because they don't connect to Usyk in the same way. They don't connect to Fury in the same way. So you say, I think Usyk is one of the best heavyweights ever. And you go, well, you're not going to tell me he'd beat Riddick Bowe. And it's like, well, I don't know if he'd beat Riddick Bowe. I think he probably would. But I think that people's connection to that is because that's the era of boxing that they connect to. And at some point, there'll be fans from all over the world, when Usyk is long retired, that will say, nah, that was the fucking guy. And you can't tell me that this new guy could beat him. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's always how it's going to be.
That's a great point. I know I asked you for a reason. That's a great point. I also think, what are we talking about? Are we talking about like what they've done as a human, like how charismatic they are, like what you said about what they did for the sport? To me, that's something different than just talking about like a pound for pound.
Which, by the way, he holds up in any of those departments.
No, absolutely.
Becoming undisputed in a war-torn country. Right. He's clearly a personality. You know what I mean? Like anytime you get that man on the mic, it's funny. So he kind of has it all, bro. And the only disconnect, I think, is Americans who can't accept
he didn't fight in America. That's the disconnect, right? His whole career didn't happen in America. So people are like, he can't be that good. He became undisputed in Europe. I couldn't watch it easy. He fought in Europe on his own. He was supposed to lose. That's the big disconnect for most people, is they didn't see his career.
I mean, could be that. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of that too. But to pat him on the back more, though, what makes him even, to me, like even greater than when you watch him fight is when you hear him talk, he'll say Terrence Crawford is the best pound for pound fighter. Like, I'm not saying that that's wrong either, but I'm just saying the fact that he don't care to even say that he's the best because he's so he looks at other guys and probably sees greatness and
he doesn't need that outside validation, bro. Like he's so solid in who he is. Like he doesn't need that, but guys from here need a steady stream of it at all times, bro. It's just different.
Yeah. Makes sense.
New Year's resolution. One New Year's resolution you guys want for boxing.
Dakota, you got one?
That's good, bro. I hadn't put any thought to that. I guess one New Year's resolution for me is that some of these big fights early in the year, at least, that everybody's able to stay healthy and we really get them done. We had to wait a long time for Better Beef and Bivol. Hopefully they can just get right back in the ring come February and we can enjoy that, as a rivalry. I think another one of them for me too would be, PBC could really do a lot for that American fight scene that we're talking about. And as everyone sort of starts to migrate to DAZN and PBC stays separate, I hope that they move their weight around a little bit. I hope that Tank takes a meaningful fight. I hope that the fights that they can make, they do make, as sort of like the American promoter of the moment, particularly as it looks like Top Rank is also going to be going to DAZN. So that's really my hope, man, is that PBC can start moving their weight around a little bit and stop being like the legacy promoter of the Mayweather era.
Yeah, I think those are great. I would love to see that as well. If for me, if what comes to my mind, I hadn't really given this a whole lot of thought, but what comes to my mind right off the bat is just something very specific I'd like to see next year. I would love to see Gervonta Davis fight Shakur Stevenson. But that's the fight that I would love. Like if I have a wish list for next year, that would be the fight that I wish to see. But as far as boxing as a whole, there's way too many imperfections to fix in 1 year, I'd say. But as imperfect and chaotic as it is, it's the sport that I love and that I do every day. So I'm going to keep doing it.
I mean, just to piggyback off of John, for a boxing column thing, I said, what one fight do you want to see? And I said Gervonta versus Shakur. which furthers makes this show just everyone gets along and there's no conflict and people are like, this is just crap. But
well, we can go there. Who will win that fight? How's that? We have conflict there.
Let me get my resolution and then we'll go there.
Sorry.
Okay. Let me get my resolution. My resolution is that the most meaningful, interesting fighters should be the number one contenders for the sanctioning bodies. So the guys that we know are the real guys. So the real guys of each division, the real guys, right? So there's no reason why Williams Opetaia shouldn't be fighting for a belt. There's no reason why Ulysses Iglesias shouldn't be fighting for a belt. There's no reason why these top guys that we're interested in seeing in these divisions shouldn't be number one contenders. So my New Year's resolution, I'd like to see the guys that we're interested in, the top guys, be sanctioned as a number one contender for the fellow champions consistently. And that we're not getting kind of inconsequential, not number one contenders that make no sense, honestly.
Yeah. Which sanctioning body do you think has it the most right generally?
I mean, people are going to get mad at me, but I'll say the WBC, because I think the WBC for the most part tries. I think the IBF at times does it really well, but then they'll throw us like a Kieran Shudinoff Boots Ennis 2 rematch, which is like, how? Like, it's welterweight. We've got like these compelling figures there. How is this guy the number one guy? Like, it just makes you, he had like 3 wins in Europe. One was an eliminator somehow against a guy that I kind of heard of. They all have their flaws, but if I had to pick one, I'd say the WBC for the most part is the one that I think I don't want to say I trust the most, but I feel like they'll make some fights happen.
Okay. What about you, Dakota?
I think I generally agree. I don't know that they're all too far from each other either. Like it was only I was watching this documentary, in the early 2000s. The FBI was investigating the IBF for taking payments for rankings and shit. So we're not that far removed from them being like an actual problem. The WBO is probably the one I know the least about. And the WBA, sometimes I look at their rankings and I'm like, I don't know where the fuck they're getting this. But I in general, it seems like the WBC and the IBF rankings are like the closest to reality.
Got it.
But I'd also wish that, they would all kind of work together a little more. I'm tired of a guy getting undisputed and then getting stripped because they won't fight the 9th best guy in the division that this guy has ranked number 1. You know what I mean? Like, they stripped that shit off of Usyk 20 minutes after the fight ended. Like, it was so fast.
Yeah. Yeah, that when they did that, it was definitely brutal to me, but in a weird way, it made the heavyweight division more compelling because now Daniel Dubois knocked out Anthony Joshua and he becomes a champion again. And now you got this kind of like asterisk too by Dubois fighting Usyk, Dubois versus Usyk, where that body shot, was it high, was it low? So it kind of made it a little bit more compelling at the same time. But you're right. I don't think that was, from a moral standpoint or just, I can't get behind that.
And I think it just confuses the fans, bro.
Well,
say again, it gives what?
Too.
What was that, Dakota? It gives what?
I think it confuses the fans.
Oh,
like a lot of fans, like guys like us, we know how all these things work. But when people are just getting into boxing and whatever, or they're casual fans who aren't like in depth understanding what they're watching, like they'll see, they're saying Usyk is the heavyweight champion. Undisputed heavyweight champion. That means there's nobody else. And then they watch Dubois and Joshua, and it's like, wait, I thought Usyk was the
right.
They haven't been following all of like the the different rulings that the bodies have had and whatever. It just makes the sport tougher to follow. I think the sanctioning bodies and PBC could all do a lot to make the sport like more accessible to fans, particularly here, because people in the UK, people in a lot in Cuba and in Mexico, they understand the game. People here don't understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay. Who's your guys' fighter of the year for 2025? If you had to pick one.
For 2025?
Yeah, next year. We're going predictive.
A speculative fighter of the year.
A speculative, like it's a guess. So I'll just throw mine out. I'm going to say Shakur Stevenson is the fighter of the year in 2025.
And what makes you say that? Because this was a pretty rough year for him, Bub.
He's fighting February 26th or 22nd. If he beats Schofield, that's 1 win. Then if he can knock out another win, then he's at 2. If he fights 3 times and 2 of those fights are meaningful fights, Schofield's a meaningful fight. If he gets another meaningful fight and a win, 3 wins, 2 high-profile fights, I think he's right there.
It's not a bad guess, bro. I mean, I wonder if Usyk wouldn't be the fighter of the year again if he hadn't already beaten Fury already. Because, for example, if he takes the Dubois Parker winner, you know what I mean? Then he takes the Caballel Zhang winner. Like, what a great year for him. You know what I mean? I honestly, my gut tells me it's going to be Bam, because it feels like Bam could have been the guy this year, but Usyk just had a legendary year. But Bam having that passing of the torch from Estrada just seems like he's going to start really solidifying himself as the best guy from the States and like a top 5 or 6 pound for pound guy.
I'm going to go what I think will happen, and then I'll go another kind of like a dark horse one. So what I think will happen is David Benavidez knocks out David Morrell, and then he fights the winner of Better BFB and wins, and then he's the fighter of the year. But another one route is I'll root for Zurdo to beat his number 1 contender and then beat Opetaia and unify, and then possibly at the end of the year unify the cruiserweight division. That would be another good one.
And that's a perfect segue to Jai Opetaia versus David Nyika. Probably said it perfect. Fight that's happening January 8th. Me and Dakota won't be back until either that day of that fight when it's happened or a day or 2 after that fight. It's Wednesday, January 8th, I believe. It's a Wednesday, West Coast. It's 12 midnight is when the card starts. So if you have a job, more than likely you're going to catch this one on replay. You're probably not waking up at 4 a.m. to see this one unless you're a big Jai Opetaia fan. Couple of questions for you guys, and both of you guys can take it on. How good is Jai Opetaia? Like, how much of a real guy do we rate him? What are we thinking? I'll start with you, Dakota.
I mean, I think he's a real guy. I think Bradis gave Usyk probably the toughest fight of his career. I mean, that was really like a flip a coin fight, and Opetaia beats him twice. I feel like when I've seen him struggle, he really struggles. Like, he's been buzzed, he's been hurt, but he always gets through it. And I think that the talent is there. And at the moment, outside of Zordo, I'm not sure who at cruiserweight is going to beat him. I don't really think there is anyone to beat him right now. The other problem, too, I don't know anything about Nyika. John, you say that he's a legit guy. Lukey, you've talked about him, but I don't know enough about him as an opponent to say, like, if that's a credible matchup or not.
We're going to get there. I'm getting us. I'm leading the way. We're going to get there. What do you think, John, of Opetaia?
I think Opetaia is a great fighter. He's explosive. He's shown a lot of mental resilience because like Dakota mentioned, we've seen him in real trouble, but he's always found a way to get through it. He's fast. He's strong. Really young, hungry. I mean, got a great mentality. I think all around he's a really solid fighter. On the weakness side of things, I would just say that he seems to be a little bit of a front runner. Fights very hard and tight early on. So I just wonder if somebody is competitive with him. What's the last third of that fight look like? Someone who's really dangerous.
If they could stay engaged for a full 12,
yeah.
You know, if he's only got like a good 8 in him, you know, somebody like Zordo, who is very flawed in his own ways, but we know he can go a hard 12.
Yeah.
So, you know, if they get to the 8th, 9th round and Opetaia is winning, but he's getting tired, you know, is somebody like Zordo able to push him over the edge?
And Zordo got the best chin in boxing, I'd say. If not the best one.
He gets hit.
One of the best chins in boxing.
I mean, he's very talented, but the one flaw he has is he's going to get hit when he opens up those combinations.
Yeah.
But my thoughts, I mean, you guys said everything about Opetaia. I guess the other thing is David Nyika, however you say it. 2020 Brazil, Australian bronze medalist. Really good, really sneaky good. He's taken the fight. Let me see. He's taken it on late notice because Hussein Sincaria, probably said that all right, Sincaria, was the mandatory opponent. He withdrew. Nyika steps in. From what I've understood, he's always wanted to fight Jai Opetaia. So like mentally, he's prepared for this fight before. He's got a deep amateur pedigree. And to me, this is like a possible upset. I think this is a real guy. I think this is a guy that, like you said, is someone that's capable of staying focused for all 12 rounds. He's capable of fighting a game plan. I think the big thing for me that I'm a little concerned with him is experience, because he's 10 fights in, 10-0. The only thing that I see that could limit him in this fight is just not having the experience. But I'm going to say something controversial. I think Jai Opetaia is a little overrated. I think that he gets by on brute force and a big, strong will. But I think at times he has some flawed technique. And I think there are vulnerabilities that people aren't really seeing because he's a very fun and devastating puncher.
He's also got fast hands. So I think people, when they see the fast hands, they think, oh, he's an athlete. You know what I mean? Which he definitely is. But I think he does, there's an element of hit ability to him that you don't always see with the top guy at a weight class.
He's also been championed, right? Like Turkey al-Sheikh in Saudi Arabia, to go back to our original point, like he has the big guns are behind him as well. So he's feeding, like they're feeding the machine, this guy, like, and telling him like he's the guy. He's
You're the guy. You're the man.
Yeah, but I don't know that he's proven to be the best cruiserweight yet.
He hasn't. It's him and Zordo.
So I don't know. I don't feel comfortable just saying he's the best cruiserweight, but I feel comfortable saying he's a great fighter. But to go back to this guy that he's fighting, who I was just checking him out, I haven't watched a whole lot of him, but what I will say about him is he's super tall. He's for a cruiserweight. He's also not a kid, so it's not like he's a 22-year-old 10-0. He's almost 30 years old, and he's fought in the Olympics, so he's fought the best guys already in the world. He's not far. He doesn't come from too far where Jai Opetaia is from. He wants to fight Jai Opetaia, like what you said. Like he jumped at the chance. He's always wanted to fight him. So that tells you something right there. Like when this guy's so like hard up to fight you, and you don't even really know about him or give a damn about him, that's a tricky dynamic as well. So I just think, I'm not saying that I'm picking this guy to win, but what I am saying is don't be surprised, and also Jai Opetaia better pack his lunch and not overlook this guy at all. I mean, because this guy is definitely not coming to lose, and he has some attributes that I think can play a factor on a big stage like this. And how do you become a star? You become a star by doing something like this. So he's taking a chance.
A social media, social media is real big, guys. And I saw a social media thing where he had the sticky notes on the wall, and it's like Nyika's like envisioning beating Jai Opetaia. Normally, I just think that's kind of cringy. But for this one, it's like, I get the sense he really thinks he's winning this fight.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that he's going to lose. And there's like 40% of me that believes he's going to upset Jai Opetaia, because Jai Opetaia is like in this position that's like the perfect place to be in a trap fight. He's like a little overrated. He's got a big machine behind him telling him he's the best thing. And he's pretty vulnerable, right? Like he's vulnerable for a guy that's being labeled what he is. And he's being propelled without winning those super big fights to the point where I think he thinks he's a superstar without that marquee win. And I think this is a very dangerous fight.
Who's his best win? Breedis, right?
Yeah, those two wins. Those are good wins.
Great. They're great wins, but Breedis was a little bit on the end of his career, I'd say, in those fights.
40?
It definitely wasn't the same Breedis that fought Usyk. And having said that, styles make fights too, right? Like Jai Opetaia was beating Breedis up. Hello?
Hold on, we're here.
All right, I lost you guys there. He was beating Breedis up early. Jai Opetaia was beating Breedis up. Breedis weathered the storm And that's when it got a little bit iffy for Jai Opetaia down the stretch. That's the concerning. That's a little like I think he broke his nose or something. I can't recall.
Broke his
But,
jaw, I think.
Oh, his jaw?
He broke his jaw. And to me, with Jai Opetaia, the thing is, like, toughness is his elite trait. So it's like he's a tough guy, but like, what's the insult when I was growing up in boxing gyms? Oh man, he can take a punch. Like,
Yeah, you don't want to be that guy.
You never wanted to hear someone say, "Oh yeah, bring him to the gym. He could take a punch." It's like a backhanded compliment. And I feel like when you bring up the elite traits of Jai Opetaia, they're often kind of like traits that we don't hear Hall of Fame boxers possess. And maybe he's the exception to the rule, but a lot of times I think toughness, power, aggression, motor, gets tired at the end of fights, doesn't stick to a game plan. It's like kind of red flag things, but he's very fun. And like Dakota said, he has really fast hands and he hits really hard, which is a hell of a problem early in fights.
And that Jack Massey win looks pretty good too. I forgot about that one because even though Massey's no world beater, he gave Joe Parker a decent fight. I mean, but the speed was a problem for him. But yeah, I mean, I'm not ready to I'm not going to just keep trying to say Jai Opetaia is not a hell of a fighter and a legitimate, top
He's a
guy.
real guy. He's a real guy.
I'm not trying to say that. I'm just not ready. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm just talking over you. I was just, I think people are trying to say he's a pound for pound guy.
Yeah, I don't know. I think he needs to beat someone like Zerto before I'm ready to say that.
Dakota, you're awful quiet.
I think also what he's missing is like having another young prime champion to be able to have that 50-50 fight. Because even in the Briedis fights, it's like he's the favorite because he's the young guy with the hand speed, knocking guys out. As great as Briedis is, not very active, right? Since the Usyk fight, he's like a fight every year and a half kind of guy. So I think what he needs is that mega fight, that Zordo fight. And look, there's not a lot of those at cruiserweight. So
no, that's the one. That's the one.
So that really is the one. There's no other fight at the moment, unless Better Beef moves up, Usyk moves down. There's some other like more fantasy type fights, but at the moment that seems like the 50-50 big fight that he needs and that the division also needs, to be honest.
Yeah.
Basically, it's going to be a really good fight, but it's not going to be watched by many people in the U.S. because it's going to be extremely inconvenient because it's a Wednesday night and it's like basically when only like very few people are awake. Maybe if I was 22, this would be awesome. Like if I was 22, I'd be like, whoa, stay up till 4 on a Wednesday. This is awesome. But like as an adult, it's like maybe I'll go to bed at 6 and I'll wake up at 4 is like a more realistic path to getting to this fight card. But this feels like I'm going to probably watch this on demand and the results of the fight will be ruined when I open my phone to check what happened while I was sleeping. 2 last hits just before we leave. Undercard has 2 fighters worth mentioning, in my opinion, and that's Justis Huni and Teremoana Jr.
I like him a lot, bro. I like Justis Huni a lot.
Okay, so I'm a big Teremoana Jr. fan, probably saying it all wrong. Justis Huni, to me, I actually don't really like him that much. I'm not saying I don't like him. I just don't see him at the world-class level. So you tell me what you see, Dakota.
I don't know if I do either. I just enjoy watching them, and I think there's a new, for a lot of years in like the Klitschko, the post Lennox Lewis era, really, it's like there's a lot of kind of slower, unathletic heavyweights, and Huni throws nice combinations, and he throws body shots, and he does things that other heavyweights don't always do. That's part of what we like about Usyk, and that's some of what Richard Torres has. Caballel, there's a new batch of heavyweights that are a little bit more dynamic, than how these NBA-sized heavyweights have been in the last 20 years or so. And I just like watching him. I think I like how he throws his combinations. There's definitely flaws. He's a smaller guy, but I think he's a lot of fun, and I think he plays into the more athletic type heavyweight.
I to be honest, I don't know these guys well enough to even comment on it. I do appreciate you mentioning these guys though, because I will go look at them now, and I always appreciate you giving guys credit that don't always get credit, that deserve. So I really appreciate that about you. But I will, on a side note, the last time I got up in the middle of the night to watch a fight was Stephen Fulton and Nia Inoue. That was actually worth it.
That's a good thing to get up for, bro.
Nia Inoue put on a hell of a performance. And to go back to the heavyweight thing, there's the two heavyweights. I mean, this is a little bit off topic, but two heavyweights that I got my eye on. You mentioned two heavyweights now. Moses Atuma, how do you say his name?
Yep, that's the one.
That guy, and I also want to see Bakole again.
Yeah, those are guys. Those are real guys. You know, those are real problems. And that Teremoana that I'm talking about, he's 2024 Olympian from Australia. I think he's a lot like Bakole, but he's faster, more athletic, faster hands, big guy. I'm telling you, Teremoana Jr. to me is a spitting image of what I think a modern George Foreman would be. Now, I'm not saying that he's going to have Foreman's career, but I'm saying he has a lot of the tools Foreman had. We just don't know if he has the intangibles, the determination, the training, the ability to win those big fights. But to me, Teremoana Jr., when I saw him in the Olympics, I said, oh my God, this is a George Foreman-like fighter. And to me, him and Bakole are like old 70s heavyweights where they're kind of big men, efficient with punches. Their feet aren't fast. They think they can just wear you down by walking you. They're fine letting you run all around because when they hit you, you're going to slow down. It's like if we were playing Fight Night, they hit you and half of your energy bars down. So they're fine letting you go.
Like Michael Moore and George Foreman.
Exactly.
Bro, I remember at one point during that Bakole Jared Anderson fight, like Bakole very casually, like he threw maybe an overhand right and it hit Jared Anderson in the shoulder. And you could see his face, like he gave him a look like what the fuck was that, bro? Like you could just see that man hits different.
Well, and he don't load up on his punches either.
Heavy hands, bro.
Coach, doesn't he put his weight into him? So he kind of steps with him and puts.
He definitely has his way of doing it, but it's not what's intriguing to me about him is I would never show somebody that's the way to fight, but it works well for him given his stature and his intangible qualities. Him and his coaches came up with a beautiful style for him. And I've heard some stories about him sparring Usyk that I'm not going to say but I've heard stories about this guy and he is legit. Like from what I can gather.
Michael Hunter stopped him.
Yeah, I think he was injured though.
Still, I mean that's pretty impressive that what Michael did. And the thing about Bakole that I think, and I always talk about the psychology of fighting. When he fights you, he does a lot of mind games, I think. And one of the big mind games I think he does is he'll let you hit him in the belly. Okay, just hit me in the belly. I don't give like with Jared, he was just giving him the body shot. Yeah, hit me in the belly. I'm gonna hit you hard. And I think that's kind of the battle is like a lot of these big guys are used to hitting someone and seeing him go. And he's coming forward and he doesn't care about your punch.
Right. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And to go back what you said about Michael Hunter, extremely impressive. I always thought Michael Hunter was underappreciated. He gave Usyk a hard fight until Usyk pulled away at the last third of the fight. But Michael Hunter is a really top fighter, I believe. Really good, awkward, hard to deal with, tough, knows how to fight really well. I remember him in the amateurs. But Bakole, I think, has improved. I think he got injured during the fight, and Michael Hunter won the fight, fair and square. But I think that Bakole has improved since then as well. I don't think Michael Hunter beats him now.
I mean, they're different guys. Dakota, any other final things? Because I know you got stuff to do tonight. You're going out. You're a youngster.
Oh, New Year's Eve, huh?
He's going New Year's Eve.
Keeping a real low profile, bub.
Your low profile hoodie. Well, what do you have to say? Any final thoughts, Dakota?
Well, I'm a little surprised at how many good fights there are for January, bro. I mean, Lukey, like 3 weeks ago, we were talking about how you went on ESPN, there wasn't not one fucking thing scheduled for the month of January, but it looks like we are actually going to get a decent little month of boxing to start off. It's been a weird and good year in boxing. There's like like I said before, there's been really great moments. There's been like stains on the sports history with Jake Paul and Mike Tyson. So we're peaks and valleys right now, but it did feel like 2024 was like a net positive.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where it goes because a lot of smart people are kind of pessimistic about the sport. I think the sport's in a great place for me personally because there's a great middle class of boxing for me. I love Pro Box TV. I love Solita Promotions, Big Time Boxing. I love 360's Hollywood Fight Nights. That's kind of my jam. I like those cards more than the big main event cards. So as long as those cards, OTX, those happen, that's what I want, you know.
Yeah, I'm with you. I appreciate the more players in the game, the better. You know, I'm excited to see what Dana White comes and does. He said he's going to do something. I don't know what.
Bro, he's not coming anywhere near boxing, bro. He needs to be the boss of everything, and he's not going to get that on this side.
Well, from what I gather, again, I'm not sure if this is true, but
this
he's
is
gonna
all
offer
alleged,
like,
you know,
yeah,
like this is just
offer
speculative.
like a platform or something, like a platform for other promoters. So he will be the boss of the platform. You get what I'm saying? Like almost like a HBO, if you will. So he will be the boss because he'll be signing guys to like, you know, fight. Because that's what he wants. He wants to, you're right, he does want to, he had an idea how he wants to do things. And then that's how he's going to do it. But I'm interested. I like the more, to me, especially being a trainer, the more options are good for the fighters to go. You know, competition makes the market much better, in my opinion.
And Lukey, to add to what you said, having like the more like middle class type of cards, you know, that was always our concern, or one of the concerns with the Saudi boxing was, where does a prospect get in the mix here? If you're with PBC, where does a prospect get in the mix? It felt like the only promoter to be a prospect with was Top Rank. You know what I mean? And I think that
and Golden Boy, they move you.
Sure, yeah. But I think that Top Rank was sort of like the place to be as a prospect. And now when you got Pro Box, you got 360, you got Boxing Insider doing some great things out by me here.
OTX Boxing's doing their shows. Solita's building guys. I get what you're saying.
Those are the guys really keeping American boxing moving as well.
Yeah, I think that's important. Is like boxing, you can't just be 5-0 and fight for a belt typically. So you have to have a record, and those records probably cost a lot of money, right? So you need someone that's willing to invest, or you need shows to buy card spots, and those cards, hopefully you get compelling matchups, right? Because you can't say a guy is going to be a world champion. You need to put him in with fringe contenders or local guys with 2 losses. And that's why me and Dakota love those Top Rank undercards, because Brad Goodman and Bruce Trampler do a good job matching guys, putting them in good. Robert Diaz used to do that on Golden Boy shows. There's a good one on 360, Demano Cato Kane versus Jorge Maravilo. Like, I like those type of fights, the prove it fights, Jermaine Ortiz versus Joseph Adorno. Like, you know, which way is your career going to go fights? Those are the fights, the deep cuts, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they're risky for the promoter too, you know, because a promoter might have already invested $100,000 in this kid, and now they're crossing their fingers. Like, I hope he's ready for this, you know, because if he loses, they're going to, you know, lose their investment most likely. I always appreciate, this is what I did appreciate about Golden Boy and Robert Diaz. You just brought him up, who I have a ton of respect for. He's not with Golden Boy anymore, but when he was their kind of head matchmaker, he would put you in a tough fight, and if you came up short, they still kind of like stood by you and tried to rebuild you, you know? Like, I appreciate that, because, you know, at the end of the day, boxing it's one night in time, right? In other sports, you lose, it's no, you know, you have a couple of losses during the season, it's no big deal. Boxing, you lose, you know, you could treat it a whole lot differently. So maybe sometimes that's fair and you should be treated that way, but sometimes I don't think it is.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. Is a lot of times boxing, everything changes once you lose a fight. And look at guys like Tevin Farmer. They had to lose a few times before they became a world champion, but it makes the path so much more difficult. So we've kind of run a little long, but that's our New Year's Eve show. Me and Dakota will be back on Dakota. When do you want to do it? Do you want to do it Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, January 8th, 9th, 10th? What are you thinking off the top of your head, bub?
I'm not sure. Maybe that's an off-air type of.
That's an off-air. Okay, so the fans don't get to know when we're coming back, but we'll more than likely be
I don't think
back.
everyone cares like when my dentist appointment is and like when I have
Yeah,
to go to
yeah.
work.
Well,
Like,
I was just seeing if I can give them a little teaser for when we're coming back. Okay, but we're not going to be back right away in the new year. We're going to come back after the Jai Opetaia fight. We'll be back within a few days of that, and then I mean it's basically going to be a little slow build. It's going to be that, and that's going to be a 360 card, and then we're going to go to the fights and stuff. But John, thank you for coming on. Do you want to promote anything? Talk about your business, all that stuff.
I just want to say thanks for having me, man. And it was great. I really enjoyed my time speaking to you guys. You both are very knowledgeable and courteous and respectful. And I wish you guys continued success in the new year.
Right on, man. That's why we brought you on. Yeah, and Dakota has a great show too. You guys should link up because he could probably dig into your motivations and stuff as a coach and stuff. But yeah, that's it. Now I'm about to hit the Rogue Echo bike and probably drink a little bit. So I appreciate you guys, and I hope that you're safe for the rest of the evening.
Yeah.
Coach, it was great to meet you, bro. And Lukey, pleasure putting in all these hours this year with you, brother.
Yeah, my pleasure, boys. You guys have a wonderful